Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Commander Pod, your Magic the Gathering podcast for all things Commander. My name is Kelton Howell.
And I'm Spencer Simpson. Today, we are continuing our series on power levels. Last week, we did an overview of our philosophy of power levels that we've been trying to develop and talk about, and finally got it out into the world. And today, we're going to be continuing talking about that, but we're going to be talking about more specific cards and specifically interaction.
Yeah, we said that we're going to do a series of episodes going over interaction, card draw, ramp. This has been a very interesting exercise for me. Honestly, I feel like I learned a ton just by preparing for this episode.
Yeah, me too. As we started talking about it, we looked through some of our decks together, and it, like you said, was a very good exercise because we were able to say, well, I built this deck to be a mid-power deck because we'd been talking about these power levels. And as like a quick little recap, our power levels are low, mid, mid high, or high mid and high. But as we were going through this, we'd kind of been trying to build our decks to one of those power levels, but we were able to be a little critical of whether or not we'd actually built them correctly at a given power level based on the number of pieces we were including.
And I will be the first to say, I have built some of my decks incorrectly after thorough evaluation and research as to what the correct levels of interaction in a deck should be.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to have to agree with you there with me as well. I guess not agree with you that you've done a poor job.
Spence.
No, yeah, sorry. I said that really
No,
bad.
I'm just kidding.
I meant, same.
No, that's awesome. I'm really excited to talk about this. Like I said, we learned a lot. Let's talk about what we count as interaction first. There's really 4 main types of cards that we would consider as interaction in deck building. The first one being reactive protection. So as you progress in your board state, you will have, or in your game, you will have developed a board state. You might have an engine or 2 online, and you really need things to help you keep those advantages that you have built. So these are things like Heroic Intervention, Teferi's Protection, Feign Death, etc. A lot of instant speed stuff is just generally going to be better. But not all protection is interaction. We're mainly talking about reactive protection.
Yeah, these are things that can effectively give you a 2-for-1, right? If someone casts a board wipe or casts a spell to remove one of your creatures, you can use this type of protection to protect your creatures. Whereas if you play something like Lightning Greaves or Swiftfoot Boots, that's also protection for your creatures specifically, but it's not reactive in any way. No one's going to like try to target your creature and then you in response like equip. I think there's maybe 2 cards that let you equip at instant speed.
Yeah,
right?
I think there are 2.
Yeah, so we're looking more at reactive protection in the sense that you can actually interact with people that are trying to interact with you and protect your board state.
Yep.
The next thing is board wipes. So these are things that wipe the board and help you come back when you're behind. So this can be board wipes that are for creatures. This can be board wipes that hit artifacts or enchantments, or all 3 of them. These are just a board wipe is going to get you back in the game, especially from a state where you're behind, and you'll often play them in most decks. You want to play a couple board wipes probably. We went through a phase where Kelton currently is not playing board wipes because we've been trying to not, or maybe you've changed your philosophy on it, but we've been trying to not make games drag on for so long with board wipes.
I do want to talk about that. I have been running fewer board wipes because of that philosophy. I do like Commander games to end, and I've had quite a few Commander games where they're like 3, 4, 5 board wipes in a game, and everyone's just rebuilding, and nobody's able to close out the game. So I have favored one-sided board wipes or asymmetrical board wipes over just the stereotypical board wipes that you might see. I do think the game has changed a lot, especially recently. This is something that other channels talk about quite a bit as well. With the introduction of things like Ward and just more powerful creatures on board, it's gotten harder to keep boards clear, and we might be in an era where you do just need to be playing more board wipes. And I'm probably putting more back in my decks, but I did go through an era where I didn't like putting a lot of board wipes in my decks. Though I will say it mostly was just me, and other people were still running board wipes. So
Sure.
it kind of felt like I was at a disadvantage sometimes.
Yeah, right. Does your vote actually count? Does you not running board wipes actually
No.
affect like the board state? I mean, it does. It's like 25% fewer board wipes probably, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
But
and I don't know. I have a few decks that don't have any board wipes, but for the most part, most of my decks run at least a couple of board
yeah,
wipes.
but to your point, you're playing more one-sided board wipes, and we're going to talk about the quality of board wipes and the board wipes you might be running at different power levels.
Yeah.
But yeah, generally speaking, either it's a type of deck that like takes longer to build up, so you're playing a board wipe so that you can like put more aggressive decks back to zero while you're catching up. Like you're ramping a ton the first like way more
Yeah.
than other people, right? And so board wipes are important. And we actually talked about Ward today. That lots of really good commanders these days have Ward just like stapled onto them. And I think Wizards has realized how bad it feels to play a high CMC commander and have it just like be removed
Instantly
immediately.
removed. And instead of putting hexproof on something, on a big threat, like maybe they would have a long time ago, since then they've realized that's a bad idea. Hexproof is horrible to play around. But Ward seems to be the thing that big, scary creatures get now.
Yeah, and I think that's great. Like it makes it harder to interact with, but it also makes Commander more fun because then your commander gets to stay on the board.
And it makes board wipes better.
Yeah, exactly. They should errata Muldrotha to have Ward. That'd be freaking
Nope,
awesome.
they shouldn't. Our third category of interaction is targeted removal. So these are things that usually target a creature, enchantment, permanent, whatever it is. It's meant to get rid of major threats and hopefully can deal with many different types of permanents and is more flexible. That helps it be more powerful and more relevant, but we'll talk more about that as we dive into power levels.
Yeah, absolutely. And the last one here is stack interaction. So typically that means counter spells, but then there are also like bolt bend style effects that are like redirecting the targets of spells, like misdirection, I guess is the blue version of that. Most of stack interaction is available in blue. That's why you got to be playing blue, man. No, it's just a different type of interaction, right? It kind of it doubles as protection, and you can kind of play them proactively to keep things off the board as well, right? You can help other people's stuff from hitting the board if it can hit creatures or I guess non-creatures hits like planeswalkers, artifacts, enchantments, and stuff like that. So they can be quite good, but do count as our fourth type of interaction here.
Yep. So let's talk about density before we dive too deep into specific examples of power level. One of the things we talked about in our last episode is that power level in terms of interaction is determined by both the density and the quality or efficiency of your interaction. So how much interaction should your deck be running? And this was the question that we had a lot of fun trying to answer.
Yeah. This like we said, this is the part where we started going through our decks and saying, well, how much interaction am I actually running? And in some cases, it was less than we thought. In some cases, it was significantly more than we thought. Like, I looked through my Wilhelt deck, which I had intended to build at a mid power level, and I thought I was running, maybe 10 to 12, 8 to 12 pieces of interaction. It turns out I was running like 16, 17 pieces of interaction in the deck, and a lot of them just doubled up as like zombie pieces. So
which makes them even better.
Which
right?
makes them better, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. So we also took a look at a lot of other people's decks. Looking at other shows like the Command Zone game nights. It's fun to scroll through their decks and see. And we think that a lot of their decks are probably playing at a pretty consistently mid power level. Maybe occasionally like mid-high, depending on the guests that they have on the show. So we looked at quite a few of their decks. We looked at pre-cons to see how much they were running, since that's generally the bottom end of our power level spectrum. We see most of the pre-cons being printed at low or low-mid power levels. And then we also recently did a play test of some of our decks that we considered to be mid-power, which helped a lot with the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is one of the things that even sparked the conversation a lot about how much interaction should be running at a specific power level.
Yeah.
Because that was I did play my Wilhelm the Rot Cleaver deck in that game, and it ended up having a lot of interaction to deal with a lot of threats. And so we were trying to figure out if that's in the correct range, and if maybe it's actually like high mid power, right?
Yeah.
So down to brass tacks, how much should you be running? After much scientific study, looking at pre-constructed decks, which we generally consider to be low power, some mid-power decks, looking at our own higher power decks and other ones around, even looking at CDH because to see like how much was running at like the highest level of competitive, even though we don't include it on our power level scale, it was helpful for reference to think about numbers.
Yep.
And we landed on these numbers. So for a low power deck, and we're only doing we're doing the big three here. Low, mid, high. We're skipping the secondary levels of low, mid, and high mid because they should kind of fall in between, probably, some of these.
Yep.
So at low power, we decided that you should probably be running between 8 to 12 pieces of interaction. And that sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say that is a range, and it's actually a pretty big range. There's 5 numbers in that range. And that really depends on what the deck is trying to do. The different styles of deck are going to want different amounts of interaction. I have a sliver deck. The sliver deck is trying to be very fast, very aggressive, very creature-centric. It doesn't want, and in some cases need, quite as much interaction.
Yeah, I mean, it's specifically the first sliver as well. So you're trying to cascade into stuff.
Very quickly.
Rebuilds very quickly, and you don't want to cascade into spells that you can't cast.
Counter spells.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Counter spells specifically. And then even removal spells, like you'd rather hit a sliver most times than hit a counter spell or a removal spell.
For sure.
Especially like a board wipe. Can you imagine? Jeez.
Yeah, that wouldn't be fun.
So at mid power, and we should clarify that this 8 to 12 number, these numbers we're saying include all 4 of those types of interactions. So that includes like the spot removal, targeted removal, stack interaction, protection, and board wipes. Yeah. So we're including all of those in these numbers here. At mid power, we think you should running anywhere between 12 and 16. So there's some overlap. We're kind of starting at the same number that you end at the previous one. But the high end of that should probably be around 16. And again, depends on the style of deck you're trying to play.
Yeah, absolutely. And then as you move into high power decks, that is going to be like 16 to 20 pieces of interaction generally.
And 20 sounds like a lot.
It sounds like a lot until you actually start looking at decks, especially high power decks, and you're like, yeah, okay, I see that some decks are actually running this much interaction, sometimes more interaction, and it's because it's needed in high power games. The tables can turn so quickly where someone goes from nothing to winning the game, and players need to have sufficient interaction to not only deal with the threat, but to deal with that player's interaction that they may have to protect their game plan.
Yeah, as you start getting to higher power, one thing they will say, is like in CDH they say this, but I think this also applies in higher power, is that life totals and board state like really don't matter because a lot of times people are playing combos at that point, and if you can find your combo, it doesn't matter what you have on board. If you have the mana to do it and the interaction to back it up, then you're just going to go for the win.
Yeah, and while these numbers do include all 4 categories of interaction that we talked about previously, one thing to note is that the composition of your interaction is going to change in addition to the density as you move across power levels. For example, lower power decks are probably going to be running less stack interaction than higher power decks. And so that's in a way, that's where some of the density comes from, is you're adding in additional types of interaction and more interaction.
Yeah, exactly. And a high power deck might be playing fewer board wipes than like a mid or low power deck, right? Because you're, again, less worried about board state potentially. And I think the other way that composition will change within these numbers as well as you move to higher power is that you'll move from more thematic interaction to more just like purely efficient interaction. And that is something we're going to talk about as well. And you'll notice as we talk about it in the quality or like efficiency portion of this. But you do move from things that are like interaction, but are like more thematic and fit in the theme of your deck, which is what thematic means, and then move towards things that are just like purely efficient, have no tie into the theme, but are just like good interaction pieces.
Because you need the efficiency to be able to play at a higher power.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think an example of this is Legolas's quick reflexes. I'll read that really quick.
Great.
Let me pull it up here.
And this is in your Garth deck, correct?
Yes, I have this in my Garth One-Eye deck, and I just want to read it really quick. So it's 1 green for an instant. It has Split Second, which is crazy. Split Second means as long as this spell is on the stack, players can't cast spells or activate abilities that aren't mana abilities. So once this goes on the stack, it's guaranteed to resolve, and no one else can do anything in the meantime, right?
Yep.
And it says, untap target creature until end of turn. It gains hexproof, reach, and whenever this creature becomes tapped, it deals damage equal to its power to up to 1 target creature. So, this is a good piece of protection, right? It is quite good. I don't think all high power decks want this. Like, it's a good protection piece for a single creature. Like, it's guaranteed to protect it from targeted removal, at least for the rest of the turn. But like I said, I don't think it goes in every deck. However, it is in my Garth deck, which I do consider a high power deck, right? The highest level on our scale. But it goes in Garth because Garth can kind of use quote unquote all parts of the animal, if that makes sense. Where I like the protection from Legolas's quick reflexes to dodge removal, and then it'll untap Garth so that I can tap Garth again to activate his ability, and I get to remove someone's creature. So I'm getting every possible benefit from Legolas's quick reflexes in this deck, and I can potentially use it outside of like an interaction piece if I just like want to untap Garth at some point, right?
So this is a example where this type of interaction plays at a higher power level because of the synergy in the rest of the deck.
Yes, exactly. So this would be like thematic interaction that you still include maybe at a higher power level, but that's because it's like the way it synergizes with your theme inherently makes it more efficient as well, right? Yeah. Like you're not just like losing efficiency for the sake of a thematic piece.
Yeah, that's cool. I really like that. That's a really great example. And you mentioned in your Wilhelt deck, like a lot of your vegetables like interaction are stapled onto zombies, which make those so much better because they, in some ways, are like multimodal. They're filling multiple slots and they're producing multiple benefits beyond just the interaction.
Yeah, it either gets me a zombie on board or does something else, or both. Oftentimes, right? Yeah. And we're talking about these decks like they're gospel, like this is mid power, this is high power. We're still trying to figure that out, and we found these numbers that we think are the correct numbers, but again, like 16 is in mid and in high. So maybe 16 is like high mid like number depending on how it synergizes with the deck. And so we're still trying to figure out where our decks actually land and what adjustments we need to make to put them at the power levels we wanted them to be at. So Wilhelt may not currently be a mid power deck or a 3. I also wanted to call this out really quick. I'm sorry, this is a minor tangent. I don't think we've talked about how we don't want to use numbers because they are because they're a bad descriptor.
Yeah.
I think in the context of our power levels, I think we should continue saying low, mid, and high, right?
Yes.
But I do think in this context they are shortcuts for like they're not.
Sure.
You know what I mean? They're not like describing like, oh, this is. Like, they're not the only descriptor. We have descriptors for what the power levels are.
Category 1, Category 2, Category 3.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
So if I do that, I guess that's to say to the listener, if I do that, it's because we're trying to mentally shortcut the power levels versus describe them with the number.
Sure. No, that makes sense.
Sorry about that tangent.
No, that's great. I lost my train of thought. Maybe it's going to come back. Sorry, I lost it on the tangent.
That's okay. Do you want to move on to quality?
Let's jump into quality here. So now, I do remember what I was going to say. These are numbers. They're trying to be scientific, but it's really more art than science at this point. You know, we've done a lot of research. These numbers will probably change over time. We'll probably be able to refine them over time, but I think it's a really great starting point. And if you have input, if this is something that you try or that you have experience with, please let us know. But yeah, we after our research and our testing, we're feeling much better about these numbers. So
Yep.
yeah, art
Absolutely.
rather than science. Okay, so now that we know how much we should be running, what about the quality or efficiency of the interaction in your deck, and how does that affect power level?
Yes. So this is, again, we're talking about this more art than science, right? It is an amalgamation of density and efficiency that ultimately determines the power level of your deck, right? And it's density is really easy to measure because you just count.
Yeah.
Efficiency is significantly harder to measure, especially in total with the interaction pieces that you're running, right? But we've tried to put together some descriptors of what interaction might look like at given power levels, because as you get more efficient interaction and you put more, like, the density of the efficient interaction in your deck, like the ratio of efficient interaction becomes higher, it will just naturally make your deck more powerful. So we've kind of tried to put some signposts for what interaction typically looks like at different power levels.
Yeah, so for lower power levels, this interaction is probably going to be more mana intensive. It could be like 3 to 6 mana on the higher end. It can be in multiple colors that can make a spell more mana intensive. It can be narrow, where maybe it can only target 1 or 2 permanent types, or it only has like one mode. There's not additional utility beyond it just doing the thing. It might be sorcery speed, giving you far less flexibility in when you can play that spell. And then, and one thing to note is that not all interaction in this category is going to be all three of these things, but it's often going to have at least one of these qualities.
Yeah, exactly. It's not gonna. If interaction is mana intensive, narrow, and sorcery speed,
Don't play it.
you probably don't want to play it. But like in a lower power deck, it probably will have one or two maybe of these qualities potentially.
Yeah. There's a fine line I've discovered between low power and just something you shouldn't play.
Yeah, for sure. Like there's, I do think there's like low power, and then there's like unplayable because
Like
there is
traps.
right. There's like
Yeah.
a strictly better version that you can play, and like budget aside, like I mean even budget included, there's like typically they're within like 3 cents of each other.
Sure.
Like, so why not just play the strictly better version?
As long as it's not affecting the overall power level of your deck.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That, I mean, there. I think the how do I say this? The cards that are typically like quite good and limited, for example, like aren't necessarily bombs, but are like pretty decent limited removal spells.
Like murder.
Yeah, like murder. I mean, murder can cut it in a commander deck, but like
Yeah.
there are like strictly better versions of murder that are like not expensive cards for one, and I still think belong in a low power deck.
Yeah.
Sweet. Moving on to mid. At mid power, you'll start to see that your interaction is becoming more efficient. So it's becoming relatively cheap, usually like 1 to 3 mana. If it's more than that, you're probably getting some like additional benefit from it, I think. And 1 to 3 mana, I guess, this is not including like board wipes, I would say.
Yeah. That's just the higher mana values.
Yeah,
That's just the way the card works.
Yeah, it might be safe to say that you maybe like 1.5 times
Yeah.
this for like the high end of board wipes, maybe 2. It's more flexible. So we talked about low being narrow, mid is a little more flexible, so it can usually target anything, or at least has like multiple targets, multiple things that it can target. Not multiple targets simultaneously, but multiple types of cards potentially, or types of permanents that it can target if it's permanent removal. Or it will have multiple modes. So if you can't remove something, there's like additional utilities of having it in your deck outside of, just casting it as a removal spell.
Yeah.
And then the last thing here is that it's instant speed. You're
Yeah.
you're not going to be playing very much sorcery speed removal, I don't think, in a mid power deck, unless your options are limited. I will say, I think a caveat to this is like monocolor decks.
Yeah.
You kind of have to run the gamut of the removal that's available
what
to you
you can
in that
get.
comer. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You have to play the interaction that's available to you, not just the removal. And I mean, like I have a mono black deck, and how many mono black counter spells are there? Very few. And so if that's interaction that I want in the deck, then I just have to run what I can get.
Yeah, or you have to run like protection instead, right? Like like you have to find a way to keep your creatures on board through a board wipe without countering the board wipe, which sometimes is even better if
Can be.
if you can do that, right?
That brings us to high. And high power decks, that's really when you start to get into free spells, repeatable spells, or repeatable effects, things that are one-sided that are affecting your opponents but not you, and just anything that's really going to put you multiple turns ahead. That's where you want your interaction to be when you're playing high power.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to give examples of these. And when we give the examples, you'll be like, oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, that makes sense that that's high power. It fits one of these categories. And we'll also try to point out the cookie cutter that it fits into within that power level.
And once again, we're only going to talk about low, mid, and high. Hopefully it can help you evaluate the middle point between those for if you're building low, mid, or high, mid decks as well.
Yeah. As you're in between, you'll start maybe smattering in a couple of the ones from the higher power level.
You're likely going to have a mix.
Level. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
A healthy mix. Sorry, go ahead, Kelts.
Yeah, no problem. So jumping into some examples of low power interaction. The first one that we want to talk about is Terminate. So this is black and a red for an instant. Destroy target creature. It can't be regenerated. This is pretty mana efficient in terms of mana value, but it's mana intensive. It's 2 colored pips. So you have to be able to cast this spell, which you're probably going to be able to do most of the time in Rakdos, though it may change what you're able to play for the rest of the turn, but it's going to get more difficult if there are additional colors in the deck.
Yeah, for sure. Like, and if you're playing Rakdos and you're playing a mid-power deck, this probably goes into mid-power deck too, right? Because your options are pretty limited, but there are just better versions of removal for creature removal because you're playing black. There are probably better versions of that, depending on the theme of your deck, right? Maybe your theme can't support some of the better versions of that. But to Kelton's point, it's mana intensive, only hits creatures. There are other, like even Bedevil, if you'll indulge me really quick, like is probably relatively equivalent to this.
It has one more colored pip, right?
One more colored pip, but it also is more flexible, right?
Yeah.
So you get 2 more potential targets with it. So this is one we felt that was an example that fell at low power, and it's mostly because it's like semi-mana intensive. Bedevil probably falls in that same category. And you'll notice it's flexible though, right? Like you get the benefit of it being more flexible, but it is
even more mana intensive. It's more
significantly.
difficult to cast.
1 pip doesn't seem like a lot, but that's like significantly more mana intensive.
Yeah. But 1 more colored pip is a lot.
Yeah, exactly. Like you can't, if you got Soul Ring out or Mind Stone or whatever, you're not going to be able to use that mana for that. You have to use your actual colored pips. The next one here is an example of some protection. It is Selfless Savior. So, Selfless Savior is 1 white, pardon me. Guys, the coffee's getting so much better. Whatever you guys have been doing, it's been helping, so thank you. Selfless Savior is 1 white for a creature, dog, 1/1. Sacrifice Selfless Savior. Another target creature you control gains indestructible till end of turn. Pretty great, pretty good. Will help you save a creature. A creature will live through a board wipe or live through some removal. There are better effects of this. There are better effects of this out there. And yeah,
this is reactive, but it's face up as well.
Yeah, exactly. Like you're not gonna catch someone by surprise unless they just forgot, and they might just forget. But I do think the fact that it is on board makes it inherently weaker because people can play around it. Whereas you can catch someone by surprise with even a 1 mana sorcery, right?
And it can be removed pretty easily.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. The next one is going to be Krosan Grip. 2 and a green for an instant. It has Split Second. We talked about Split Second earlier. As long as it's on the stack, players can't cast spells or activate abilities that aren't mana abilities. And when you cast this, destroy target artifact or enchantment. So this is an example of one that is a little flexible in that you can hit an artifact or enchantment. But for 3 mana, you want to be hitting more than just an artifact or an enchantment generally at higher powers.
Yes, there are just better versions of this effect that are either A, cheaper, right? More efficient mana-wise, or B, more flexible, right? So at 3 mana, I think the classic example that people play in their green decks is Beast Within.
Yeah.
Beast Within, same mana cost for an instant, destroy target permanent. Its controller creates a 3/3 beast creature token. that token's not very often going to be relevant. This hits anything. So it's Corrosive Grip's awesome. Notably can't hit creatures. What's going to kill you? Creatures. So this Beast Within, I think, is going to be better if that's what you're trying to interact with, because it will also then take care of the problem enchantment and artifacts people are playing.
And does Beast Within just get better at higher power levels as well because the 3/3 becomes less relevant?
I would argue yes.
Yeah.
I would definitely argue yes.
It's a bigger downside in lower power games.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, do you want to read the next one?
Yes. The next one here is Dream Fracture. Dream Fracture is 1 blue for an instant. Counter target spell, its controller draws a card. Draw a card. So it's a counter spell that cantrips. Your opponent also gets to draw a card or places the card in their hand. But it's a counter spell. It's 2 mana more. Sorry, 1 mana more than like counter spell, like the classic counter spell. But it's like a pretty good card. Probably low power because there are more efficient counter spells, right? Better versions of this.
And you might say, so I think the comparison that you want to make is Arcane Denial, which is 1 in a blue instant counter target spell. Its controller may draw up to 2 cards at the beginning of the next upkeep, and you draw a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. So let's just wipe away some of the extra stuff here and just say it's the same thing, except for they get to draw 2 cards, and you still only draw 1.
Yep.
The 1 extra blue pip on Dream Fracture makes it that much worse that it's better to let them draw 2 cards, because for counter magic, the efficiency of the spell matters so much.
Yeah, with counter magic, you are holding it up after your turn. So having 1 extra pip to be able to cast a permanent spell, or I guess a sorcery that is like affecting your board state and advancing your game plan, and then being able to have counter magic up is really important. So yeah, like Kelson's saying, the 1 additional pip and the fact that it's 1 additional colored pip in blue is like super relevant there. So that's why we put it in low power, just because Arcane Denial is, strictly better, and we put Arcane Denial at about a mid power. So this one feels like it's, 1 step worse. And honestly, that's kind of how we're going to rank these, is they are usually within a step of each other, right? Like there's the next step up is the strictly better version, and maybe there's some in between, but like that's maybe the one you're going to want to be playing next if you're upgrading your deck.
Yep. The last example that we have in low is a board wipe. It's a one-sided board wipe, but it is 9 mana. This is in Garruk's Wake. It's 7 black for a sorcery. Destroy all creatures you don't control and all planeswalkers you don't control. I play this card in one of my decks, and it is very good when it resolves.
Yes. I think the last 3 words there are pretty potent. Yep. When it resolves is pretty big, because not only is 9 mana like a lot of mana, right? But playing that into open blue mana is pretty spooky.
Yeah, if they counter it, then you just got time walked.
Yep, you just got time walked.
Yep. It feels bad. So the deck that I play this in actually does not try to hardcast it. It tries to cheat it.
Yeah, and cheating this out would make your deck probably like higher power, right?
Yeah, if casting this for 0 mana is awesome.
Super great. And this is one-sided. We talked about things being one-sided at like higher power levels, right? Mm-hmm. Like they're putting you turns ahead because they're only dealing with other people. The downside of this is that it is 9 mana and it is not like flex. There's like not multimodal. You can't be like, I can also cast it for 2 to destroy one opponent's creature or whatever.
Yep. So it's not very flexible. It's very expensive, but it can be powerful when it resolves. And so if you're just trying to cast it for 9 mana, it's probably a lower power card.
Yep, absolutely. Should we move on to mid-power?
Let's do
mid-power examples here? All right, the first ones in mid-power are some of the most premier creature removal in the game. It is Swords to Plowshares and Path to Exile. Swords to Plowshares, they're both equivalent in their effect. In the first part of their effect, which is Swords to Plowshares, 1 white, instant, exile target creature. The difference being Swords to Plowshares says its controller gains life equal to its power. Path to Exile is that they search for a basic land.
A basic land.
And put it onto the battlefield. Tapped. And then shuffle, notably.
Yeah.
No,
incredibly efficient. It exiles the creature. The downside is very low, especially for Swords to Plowshares. It is very narrow. It only hits creatures. And that's probably mostly the only ding on these cards.
Yeah.
They're very good.
The hitting creatures and then Path to Exile, like ramping them, right,
Yeah.
is like, oof, they get another land. And if you're Path to Exiling like turn 3, then like that's relevant, right?
Yeah.
But like turn 7 or 8, it's becomes less and less relevant as you are being able to remove one of their big threats permanently because it's exiled for 1 white man.
Yep.
The next one here is some protection. It is Heroic Intervention. Kelton, would you read that? I'm about to have a coughing fit.
Absolutely. Heroic Intervention, the classic 1 and a green for an instant. Permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. This is super flexible. It is protection. It doesn't remove anything. But what's great is that it's proactive or it's reactive protection for your permanents. If someone tries to target one of your permanents, it's also reactive protection for if somebody tries to board wipe. And that is such a blowout. Playing a Heroic Intervention into a board wipe feels very, very good.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet. Can I say I've never been able to do it? It's
Really?
never happened for me.
I've
wanted
been
to
able to
so
pull it
badly
off.
all the time. If like every time you draw Heroic Intervention, you're like, oh man, I'm holding up 2 green mana or 1
know.
green mana and something else. Please, somebody board wipe. This is going to be so good for me.
I mean, I have frequently used it just to save 1 creature.
I should do that way more often. I get more excited about like the ceiling than the
Yeah.
the floor of the card.
Yeah.
This one, I think it's notable for us to talk about how we kind of got a little baited into putting this into high power because of the price tag on this card.
Yeah, and it used to be higher, right? Like when I bought this card, I think it was more expensive than it is
Yeah, it was
now.
like $12. It's like $8 now though, and that's nothing
Yeah.
to sneeze at. That's like a pretty expensive card.
That is an expensive card, but it's just protection. It's not as flexible as other cards, and as we give examples of higher power interaction cards, this just starts to not look quite as good.
No, I think it's and that's why we bumped it down ultimately is we're trying to do this a little more price agnostic. Sometimes higher power, I like a fair amount of the time, higher power does push cards to be more expensive. That's like people want to run powerful cards. But not all the time. Sometimes people just like running a card because they think it's cool.
Yeah, I mean, I see one card on our high list that's the lowest price is currently 34 cents. So we'll come to that one and talk about how price doesn't necessarily mean power.
Yep, price does not always equate to power. The next one here is Boros Charm, which is red, white for an instant. Choose 1. Boros Charm deals 4 damage to target player or planeswalker. I didn't realize that didn't say creature. I think that makes this a little worse. Permanents you control gain indestructible till end of turn. Target creature gains double strike until end of turn.
I don't think so. I think this card's busted.
It's still very good.
I think this card is definitely mid, and I do think it's underplayed, even though it is in 2 colors. So, yeah, you're not going to choose the first mode very often. It's sweet if you get to snipe a planeswalker, or maybe you're able to finish off a player with 4 damage. Probably not. Really what you're looking for is the protection of permanents you control gain indestructible until end of turn. That's obviously very good against a board wipe. Also very good attacking during attacking. But even better when attacking is giving something double strike to trade profitably. Or not trade, just take out a creature, take out a big threat, or get in for, massive unexpected damage. And it's neither, I wouldn't play either of those cards at this mana cost, but together I do play this card.
Yeah, that's the thing. This is like 3 cards in one, right?
Yeah.
It is a lightning bolt for or a lightning strike, I guess, because it's just 4 damage for either a player or a planeswalker, or the second half of Heroic Intervention,
Yeah.
or something that gives double strike. I don't know. There's lots of things that give double
I
strike.
think it's good. You are going to play this card a lot in a deck that cares about these things. It's either got to care about attacking or care about casting spells or dealing damage. I will say, I'm starting to come around on planeswalkers being more prevalent in Commander. And gosh, if I just had 4 extra damage to be able to just kill off a planeswalker, that would be very nice.
Let alone unblockable damage, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's the hardest part about getting through to planeswalkers is a lot of them that are relevant in Commander protect themselves with creatures.
The good ones protect themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you can just be like, okay, you used your minus ability on your Planeswalker, and now it's dead because I have
Yeah.
a Boros Charm. Thank you very
sweet.
much.
So it's just the flexibility I think that we want to showcase here. Like that is something that can boost the power level of a card.
Yep, absolutely. So this and cards like this, I think looking at it next to Terminate makes it look significantly better as well, right? Terminate obviously removes a creature,
yeah.
which is huge. But the fact that this has virtually 4 modes, I know one of them is target player or Planeswalker, but like that's kill a player or kill a Planeswalker is what that reads, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is, I mean, if they're within range, but like that's the only time you're gonna use
That's
that
for
mode.
sure on my achievement list now is to kill a player with Boros Charm damage.
I like running Lightning Bolt in my decks because I've killed a player with Lightning Bolt in
Yeah.
one of my like burn decks, right? It's
Yep.
it's a relevant card.
Absolutely.
The next one, Kelson, would you like to kick us off with this one?
Yes, I love this card. An offer you can't refuse. Such great flavor. This is blue for an instant. Counter target non-creature spell. Its controller creates 2 treasure tokens. 1 blue mana. So good for interaction. It's awesome.
Yeah, you'll notice a lot of the ones we're talking about right now are like within the 1 to 2 to 3 range.
Yeah.
I'm looking at them right now. They're all 2 mana in their like base modes, right? And I say base modes because the one coming up you'll see.
Yeah, I
But-
mean, Swords to Plashes, Path to Exile are each 1. Heroic Interventions 2, Boros Charms 2, offers 1.
Yeah, sorry, 2 or less. I guess is what I mean. Yeah, Offer You Can't Refuse. It's such a good card, and you're right, such good flavor. Like, hey, sorry, your thing's gone, but here's some treasure. Here's some money.
It's awesome.
The last one here is Damn. Damn is black for a sorcery. Destroy target creature. A creature destroyed this way can't be regenerated. And you might be saying, Spencer Kelton, this is exactly the text of Terminate.
Yep.
But the plus side here is that it has Overload for 2 and a white, or 2 and 2 white.
Yep.
And if you overload a spell, we'll give you a little reminder. When you cast a spell for its overload cost, Overlord, I keep saying Overlord.
Overlord again, our favorite mechanic.
We're going to petition to have Overlord be a mechanic. If you do overload this spell, you change target in its text to each.
Which is
So-
just Wrath of God.
Which is just Wrath of God. So again, 2 cards in 1.
Yeah. Yeah, we were talking about this. The only thing that doesn't make this super, super, super good and very expensive is the fact that it's across 2 colors. And
Yeah.
that it requires 2 colored pips for each color.
Yes, that does bring it down a little bit. But
Yeah.
like on the high end, it's still only 4 mana to destroy every creature.
If this was black, destroy target creature, or 2 black, destroy all creatures,
It would be
holy
like,
cow.
It would be like $40.
Yeah, that card would be so good.
I mean, Damnation is
It's
kind of
20
one of the
bucks.
premier. Yeah, it's one of the premier
Yeah.
board wipes in black. This is just it would be strictly better Damnation.
Yeah. So if you're playing white, black, then yeah, I mean this card is great. But
It's a great one.
It is flexible, but it is a little mana intensive.
Yeah, absolutely. Should we move on to high? And
Yeah.
hopefully, as we talk about these ones, hopefully it has been a pretty clear distinction between each power level. This one will feel like, I think, a bigger jump, and that's just because the cards you play at high power level are just like objectively the best version of effects.
And I think that you're probably going to see them in fewer decks because of that, right? So like lower cards, you're going to see low, mid. You're going to see them like in all those areas, and mid cards you're going to see in low, mid, high. A lot of the high cards you're only going to see in like high, mid, and high, and a lot of them maybe only in high. So the first one here is Mana Drain. Blue for an instant counter target spell. At the beginning of your next main phase, add an amount of colorless mana equal to that spell's mana value.
this card is crazy.
It's crazy.
It is strictly better counterspell.
Yep.
Counterspell is blue, counter target spell, and this is the same mana cost and just staples an additional mana advantage at the end.
Not only is it strictly better than Counterspell, it is strictly way better than
Yes.
than Counterspell.
It is strictly better by factors.
Like, I have snapped this off just for mana before. Like, I've treated it as a ritual where I'm like, I want to cast my commander next turn, and if I counter their 3 mana spell, I can cast my commander and leave interaction up.
Yeah, it's so incredibly good. It might be one of my favorite cards. This is one of my
Yeah.
first like big boy expensive cards that I bought.
Yeah.
I bought this one and Dockside Extortionist at the same time.
Ooh.
While they were kind of in a valley, which was nice.
When
which
they were
felt good.
cheap. Yeah,
which was
cheaper.
good. They both got printed in this same Double Masters set.
Yeah.
But it's incredibly good. And this is an example. We're going to jump back to the things that you should be looking out for the signposts for a high power interaction spell. And it is puts you multiple turns ahead. Mm-hmm. And that is what this does. This is Counterspell plus Time Walk.
It's all
No,
time
but
walk.
it is. We're so sorry, the Commander Pod, for stealing your joke. We just think it's too hilarious. But it is like, I mean, it's not Counterspell plus Time Walk, but it's like it puts you multiple turns ahead in mana. If you counter, like you said, a 3 mana spell, that is Counterspell plus like a Black Lotus.
Yeah.
A Black Lotus for colorless mana.
Yeah. It's really good. It feels pretty bad to play against at lower power levels.
Yeah,
it's just
for sure.
it's so much higher, and that's why it's in high.
Yeah, it warps the game. I, to my shame, have played this at lower power levels, encountered a 5 mana spell, and
Practically won the next turn.
it was awesome, and it also felt really bad, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So the next one here is I wonder how people will agree with us on this one.
This one's interesting.
Yeah, I'm feeling more good about it looking at its mana cost because I thought it was 4 mana value.
Oh, really?
For some
Yeah,
reason.
it's
Yeah,
not.
it's 3's really good. So it's Teferi's Protection. 2 and a white for an instant. Until your next turn, your life total can't change, and you gain protection from everything. All permanents you control phase out. Exile Teferi's Protection.
Yeah.
Hopefully this illustrates why we put Heroic Intervention at a mid power and this at high power.
Yeah.
Heroic Intervention is very good. It can stop single target removal. It can stop board wipes that explicitly say destroy. It is a very good spell. Teferi's Protection will dodge board wipes that exile, board wipes that get --, board wipes that force you to sacrifice. It is just strictly better for one more colorless pip. Obviously in different colors.
Yeah.
But it is just the best protection effect that exists.
Sure. Also, you gain protection from everything, which means like you don't take damage. You can't be targeted by abilities. It's not only protecting your permanents, and it's not just creatures. It's permanents, right?
Yeah.
Heroic Intervention is only creatures. This is permanents and you. So the flexibility along with the power of this card makes it, I think, just quite good. I think this fell into high. I think it is kind of in between high and mid. It's probably like a high mid card, but for the sake of the discussion, we threw it in the high bucket.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. So the hard part here is that protection, generally speaking, we talked about Legolas's quick reflexes, right? Mm-hmm. I think protection, generally speaking, kind of caps out at high mid, right?
Sure. Protection, not the keyword protection that's on Teferi's Protection. Protection as in cards that
protection
protect.
type interact. Yeah, the type of interaction, the subtype of protection in an interaction, I think does cap out at around high mid power level, and then you're looking for more like stack interaction, right? Stack interaction or on board interaction. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. I mean, this gets around Farewell.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's really good.
Yeah.
It's really, really good. Also, I'm going to be pedantic really quickly, and Heroic Intervention is permanence. It's not just creatures.
Is it? Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that's what makes it good.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it is like, again, it gives them Hexproof and Indestructible, which is great, but only gives them Indestructible. So if someone casts Farewell or Toxic Deluge or a spell that makes you sacrifice, right? Each player sacrifices that many creatures or whatever, then Heroic Intervention is more or less worthless at that point.
Yep, this card is great. Okay, next one. This is such a big bad in Commander. This is Cyclonic Rift. 1 and a blue instant. Return target non-land permanent you don't control to its owner's hand.
That seems okay.
Overload 6 and a blue. So if you cast a spell for its overload cost, you change target to each.
Yep. So how does it read it? How does it read with that change?
So, have you ever cast it for 1 in a blue?
Um,
I think I have once or twice.
I think I've once or twice. I mean, again, it's flexible, which makes it amazing.
Yeah, but I've cast it for 7 mana a lot, and that makes it return each non-land permanent you don't control to its owner's hand.
It's really good.
Oh, the card's so good, and it's one colored pip.
Yep, I have heard people argue that this is not particularly high power because it's like telegraphed. You see it coming. Like if someone has 7 mana open, you know it's coming. Not everyone's got not everyone's playing blue. First of all, to have stack interaction to play this, especially at like mid power level.
Yeah.
And what do you do if you don't have even if you see it coming, this is completely resetting the game outside of land drops for everyone else at the table.
Also, I've cast this on my turn.
Yeah,
quite
right.
a few times.
Yeah, Sorcerer Speed Cycrypt is great.
Yeah, because then you can attack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's phenomenally good. It is significantly better than in Garrick's Wake.
Yeah. Oh yeah. This
The
card
fact
is
that it's
amazing.
an instant is just wild too.
I can't believe that it's an instant. This is an example of a card that I don't. Do you think they knew how powerful this would be when they made it?
Dude, they know now. They know now. They're never printing a card like this ever again.
I mean, this was first printed in. Yeah, I mean, it was a while ago. I guess it was printed first in
One of the Ravnica blocks, right?
2012. Yeah, it was in Return to Ravnica.
Yeah, they've had a lot of time to continue making mistakes in cards
Yeah.
they've printed since then.
But luckily, they keep reprinting this mistake, so I'll take it as much as I can get.
Yeah, exactly. I know they've reprinted it so much recently,
Yeah.
and it's still
Great.
like $40.
Yeah, it's still very expensive.
That's crazy.
Unfortunately. Yeah, this card is great. It's removal, it's one-sided, it's flexible, and it puts you multiple turns ahead.
Yep, it kind of checks every box that you want in a high power card. The next one is Deflecting Swat. Deflecting Swat is 2 in a red for an instant. If you control your commander, you may cast a spell without paying its mana cost. So hey, check free. You may choose new targets for target spell or ability. It just lets you redirect a spell. The thing I think is so sick about this, I mean, outside of it being free, is that effects like Bolt Bend, and I'm gonna look it up just to double check.
Yep.
But I believe Bolt Bend says change the target of target spell or ability with a single target.
I think Bolt Bend does say that.
Yeah, I just looked it up. It does. Deflecting Swat is you may choose new targets. So anything
Yeah.
that targets multiple things, you're just like, sweet, I get to determine how this resolves now. It's phenomenally good.
It's great.
the best
And this
version
is
of
also a placeholder for most of the powerful free spells.
right, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Yep, it is
Fierce
all of the
Guardianship,
free
Force
commander
of Will.
spells. Yep.
Yeah.
Put them in here. The next one is the 30 something cent card Kelton was talking about.
Yeah, this is great. This is Culling Ritual. It's a little more expensive. It's maybe not quite as efficient as some of the other cards on this list. It's 2 black green for a sorcery, so also sorcery speed. So you're like, okay, 4 mana, 2 colors, sorcery speed. This can't be good. Destroy each non-land permanent with mana value 2 or less. Add black or green for each permanent destroyed this way.
So I think this is an example of a higher power one on our list that probably only sees play in high power decks because it probably only works in high power decks
Yeah,
the way it's intended, right? Like
Yeah.
you might be playing against a token deck and feel like awesome about it, but maybe not.
but in higher power decks, there's a lot of cards that make tokens, and there's a lot of really good engine pieces that are 1 or 2 mana.
Yeah, and ramp, like you're playing a lot of the best ramp, which is, 2 mana or
craps.
less.
Yeah, and not only are you getting put multiple turns ahead, but you are slowing everybody else down. And so it's kind of doubly putting you multiple turns ahead.
Yeah, you get to use all of your mana from whatever mana producers you have that might get destroyed. You
Yep.
get to float all of that or use it prior, destroy everything on board, and then get a giant burst of mana.
Yeah.
It's incredibly powerful.
Yeah, I do like that, though. This is probably an example of a card that is high power in high power matchups. But if you put this in a low power deck, it probably wouldn't be great. It'd probably be fine.
No, it scales with the power level of the table, and people make the same excuse for Dockside, but Dockside's kind of good no matter where you play it.
You
But
only
Cold
have
Ritual-
to. You only have to make 3 mana for it to be good.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's a relevant creature type in some decks too.
Yeah.
It's a pirate goblin, two of the most relevant creature types. All right, the last one on this list is Aura Shards. I'm so sorry. The cough is getting better. It just took longer to engage this time.
It's just getting worse just now.
Yeah, it gets worse because I'm talking so much because I love to hear myself talk. Aura Shards is 1 green-white for an enchantment. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may destroy target artifact or enchantment. A creature, not non-token.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
and This is an example of one where like you're not gonna play Aura Shards unless it's high power in your deck, right?
Yeah.
Like you're never gonna play Aura Shards where it isn't high power, right?
Yeah, but I would argue that like no matter what deck you put this in, you're trying to play creatures at some point, right? And if your creatures have destroy target artifact or enchantment stapled to them,
Stapled onto them.
yeah,
Yeah, okay, that is good. And it's because it's repeatable. It's because you can do it a lot. And then obviously in a deck that's making tokens or flickering creatures or any number of horrible things.
degenerate gameplay
Yeah.
patterns.
Then this is just like your opponents can never play artifacts and enchantments.
Yeah, it's very good, and it's on like a notoriously tough to interact with card type.
Yeah,
like people,
enchantment's
especially
difficult.
yeah, especially at like lower power, depending on your colors too.
Yep.
But like especially at lower power, people may not have like enchant removal because they're mostly worried about creatures, right? And they probably may not be playing green or white, which are kind of the two colors that can deal with enchantments.
Yeah. Yeah, this is another interesting one for the list, I think. And it's probably a card that quite a few people have not heard of or encountered before, potentially.
Yeah. Pray that you don't. We had one resolve the other day, and it turned out to not be so bad because I was able to power through.
I was gonna say
victorious.
you were winning that game pretty handily, and there wasn't much to stop you in that particular game.
No, but if this comes down turn 3 and no one's like clearly ahead, it's just
Yeah.
like, cool, I'm just gonna snipe all of your mana rocks each turn.
Yeah.
Like it feels kind of bad.
All right, well that's gonna do it for building around interaction by power level. So we went over the density and the quality of interaction at different power levels. We would love to hear your thoughts. If you think there are other really good examples of low, mid, or high power interaction, let us know. And we'd love to hear what your experience is building at different power levels. As always, thank you all for listening. And there will be another new episode next week in the same vein, but we will be talking about Ramp. So join us next week as we dive into Ramp.
Yes, please let us know how wrong we are in the comments. Please tell us which ones you think belong at different power levels. We've really appreciated all of your comments. Some of you posted very long comments. We tried to take time to reply to those, and we really appreciate it. We love hearing other people's points of view. We love trying to defend our own because we think we're right, but also we're trying to be open to like figuring out the right way to go about this, right?
Yeah, and I would say this especially as a discussion. It's something that we're trying to figure out. I think you and I have put a lot of energy into trying to figure it out, but it doesn't mean it's solved. Like we are still solving this equation. So the discourse is welcome. It is an open discussion. You can find our episodes on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe if you don't want to miss out on next week's episode on Ramp. And as always, you can reach out on thecommanderpod.com. You can connect with us there, and there's a way to get a hold of us.
Yeah, thank you for tuning in, everybody. We love you. Share this with your friends. Get us out there. Thanks for all your participation and everything. Please tune in next week. And until next time, remember to always pay the one.